The hidden tricks that made 60s muscle cars so dangerous. The most famous horsepower figure in American history was a calculated lie. In 1967, General Motors officially listed the Corvette L88 at 430 horsepower. This was not engineering data. It was corporate camouflage designed to smuggle a 560 horsepower race engine past insurance adjusters. Engineers exploited a regulatory loophole by testing the engine at an arbitrarily low RPM to create a deliberate information void in the brochure. While marketing promised refined touring, they completely omitted the mechanical penalties where the extreme camshaft duration caused the engine to stall at traffic lights and the deleted fan shroud guaranteed overheating in city traffic. Detroit sold you a race car in a tuxedo, but they left you to discover its violent temper on your own. This channel runs on curiosity, not hype, and a few dollars of support from real fans helps it grow. If you are ready to uncover the engineering secrets Detroit tried to bury, hit like and subscribe. Tell me in the comments, do you prefer the comfortable lie of the brochure or the mechanical truth of the street? Let us find out. But falsifying the specs was easy. Falsifying the physical car required a masterclass in engineering. In March 1964, Car and Driver published a cover story that defied the laws of physics. The editors pitted the new Pontiac GTO against the legendary Ferrari 250 GTO, and the heavy American coupe allegedly hit 0 to 60 miles per hour in a blistering 4.6 seconds. To put that in perspective, a standard GTO on 750/14 bias ply tires struggled to break the 5.8-second mark. The magazine car was 1.2 seconds faster, a gap that represents about 10 car lengths on a drag strip. This was not a statistical anomaly. It was an industrial psychological operation orchestrated by Jim Wanger's Pontiac's marketing genius. Wangers knew the production. 389 cubic inch V8 would be humiliated by the Italian exotic. So under the cover of corporate secrecy, he ordered a phantom swap. The red test car sent to the journalists was not a 389. It was fitted with a 421 Super Duty, a hand-built racing engine intended for the drag strip. The deception was brilliant in its simplicity. The 389 and the 421 shared the exact same external block dimensions. Without a forensic teardown to measure the cylinder or the massive torque advantage of the 421 remained a ghost in the machine, invisible to the writers but violent on the asphalt. The conspiracy went deeper than just hardware. It involved a shadow factory at Royal Pontiac in Michigan. While customer engines were assembled with tight friction, heavy factory tolerances, the press fleet underwent blueprinting. Mechanics disassembled these engines, milling the cylinder heads to spike the compression ratio and intentionally loosening the bearing clearances to reduce parasitic loss. This allowed the Ringer engines to rev freely to 6,000 RPM, while a customer's engine would fight its own internal friction at 5,000. When buyers took their new GTOs to the local strip, they were baffled. Their cars felt sluggish, consistently trapping slower than the magazine results. Detroit did not just exaggerate. They sold a simulation of performance. The car in the magazine was a dedicated race weapon. The car in your driveway was a mass-produced clone, and the gap between them was a secret Jim Wangers took to the grave. Detroit did not engineer numbers. They engineered behavior. While Pontiac was busy fabricating numbers, Chrysler and Ford engineers were struggling with a brutal physics problem: a 426 Hemi engine generating 490 pound-feet of torque tries to twist the entire unibody chassis like a wet towel. To combat this, they installed race-spec hardware that made street driving a nightmare, banking on the fact that customers would not understand the engineering trade-off until it was too late. The most visible example of this silent engineering was hidden in the rear suspension of the 1968 Dodge Charger and Plymouth Road Runner. Chrysler engineers knew that hard launches caused torque twist, lifting the right rear tire off the pavement and wasting power. Their solution was the bias leaf suspension system. They deliberately installed a stiffer spring pack with an extra leaf or a higher arch on the passenger side compared to the driver's side. This preload meant the car was designed to sit visibly crooked in the dealership lot, leaning noticeably to the left, just so it would level out for the few seconds it spent accelerating at 5,000 RPM. The owner's manual never explained this. It simply left buyers believing their brand-new muscle car had been assembled incorrectly. Ford deception was auditory. If a buyer selected the drag pack option on a 1969 Mustang to get the aggressive 391 or 430 rear axle ratios, they unknowingly received a Detroit locker differential. Unlike a standard limited slip unit that used friction clutches for smooth operation, the locker utilized a system of mechanical ratcheting dog teeth. On the drag strip, these teeth locked the axles solidly together. However, during a low-speed turn in a grocery store parking lot, the mechanism had to physically unlock to allow wheel differentiation. This process created a violent metallic banging noise that reverberated through the chassis, sounding exactly like a snapped U-joint or a shattered axle, yet service managers were instructed to tell terrified owners that this catastrophic sound was a premium feature. Chevrolet trick involved the famous cowl induction hood on the 1970 Chevelle SS. Marketing claimed it fed cool, dense air to the 454 engine, but the engineering reality was different. The flapper door was controlled by a vacuum actuator connected to the intake manifold. At idle or cruising speeds, the engine produced roughly 15 to 20 inches of mercury in vacuum pressure, which sucked the door shut tight. The door would only open when manifold vacuum dropped to zero, which only happens at wide-open throttle. This meant that for 99% of the time the car was in motion, the aggressive hood scoop was functionally useless and blocked airflow the exact moment the driver lifted their foot off the gas. By 1969, the web of deception had expanded from the factory floor to the driver's seat. Detroit provided the weapon, but they conveniently withheld the tactical manual on how to use it without self-destructing. Owners of solid lifter legends like the L88 Corvette or the 426 Hemi Cuda soon discovered a cruel paradox. Driving sensibly as the owner manual strictly advised was actually destroying their engines. The mechanical enemy was carbon loading. The high-performance camshafts in these engines featured massive valve overlap, keeping intake and exhaust valves open simultaneously to scavenge gases at high RPM. However, in the stop-and-go reality of city traffic, this overlap caused incomplete combustion, rapidly fouling spark plugs with wet fuel and heavy soot. The car would sputter, cough, and die at traffic lights. Dealership mechanics knew the cure, but could never document it on a service ticket: the Italian tune-up. Owners were forced to take their vehicles to the highway and hold the engine at redline in lower gears for sustained periods, using extreme cylinder heat to literally burn the carbon deposits off the plugs. The car effectively required illegal speeds just to maintain basic functionality. The second half of this underground code lived in the transmission tunnel. General Motors offered the legendary Muncie M22 4-speed, nicknamed the Rock Crusher, for their highest output machines. While standard transmissions utilized helical cut gears for silent, polite operation, the M22 used straight-cut spur gears. These gears eliminated the axial thrust that could split a transmission case under load, but the trade-off was a gear whine that screamed like a supercharger at any speed. Detroit installed this agricultural hardware for one specific unwritten purpose: power shifting. The straight-cut design allowed the gears to engage with brutal force at 6,500 RPM without exploding. Drivers learned that to achieve the quarter-mile times promised in magazines, they had to keep their right foot planted flat on the floor and slam the shifter into the next gate without fully disengaging the clutch, a violent technique that would shatter a standard gearbox instantly. The manufacturers provided the capability but remained legally silent on the method, leaving the driver to navigate the delicate balance between a record-setting run and a driveway full of transmission fluid. That silence shaped the way drivers learned, adapted, and survived. Detroit's silence was not malice. It was collusion. Engineers and buyers were co-conspirators, smuggling race technology past insurance regulators. They sold you temperamental, dangerous machines because that was the only way to get raw power onto the street. Today, a 700-horsepower car is a marvel of sterile perfection, quiet and predictable. But we revere muscle cars because they were flawed. They demanded a relationship. You had to tolerate the Detroit locker clunk and master the overheating engine. The silence in the brochure forced you to become a tamer, not just a driver. That is the soul modern engineering has destroyed. Independent work like this survives only when people decide it should. Your support keeps the archives open, so please consider pitching in a few bucks if you can. If you enjoyed this, hit like and subscribe. Tell me below. For a daily driver, do you want the sterile perfection of a modern Hellcat or the violent, flawed character of a 1969 Hemi? I will see you in the next one.